So it was just kind of a normal day. Jesse wasn't expecting any visitors. He was sort of just chilling at home. When there was a knock on the door, he slowly gets up, makes his way to the door, and opens it up, and he immediately recognizes who's at the door. See, this guy at the door, his name was Samuel, had a reputation because he was a prophet. Now, a prophet was somebody that God speaks through to people. So God gives a prophet a message that he wants people to know. And so the prophet supernaturally hears from God and then goes and shares it with the people. And Samuel was a prophet that everybody knew. In fact, there was a little bit of fear in Jesse's heart when he saw him. He goes, now, do you here with good news or the whole like wrath of God thing? And Samuel says to Jesse, I am here to anoint one of your sons to be the new king of Israel. Now that's the kind of visit you want, right? Your family goes from, no big deal, to, oh, we're royalty. And so Samuel says to Jesse, I'm here to anoint one of your sons. And immediately Jesse thinks of his oldest son, Eliab. Now Eliab, the dude looks like a king. He's taller than everybody. The guy's built, okay, you can consider all this. The guy is jacked and he's a stud at everything he does. And so Jesse immediately goes, Eliab, come here. And Eliab walks over and he's like, yeah, Dad. And Jesse presents Eliab to Samuel and he says, this is my oldest son, the one in whom I'm so proud. And Samuel looks at him, and Samuel knows what a king looks like because Samuel has worked with King Saul. King Saul is described, and everybody knows that King Saul is head and shoulders above everybody else. Saul was a giant guy. He was huge. And so there is this understanding that that's what a king looks like. I had dreams of playing baseball all the way up until I was about 18 years old, and then I realized I wasn't going to get any bigger, and I'm not built like a professional baseball player. Eliab was built like a professional baseball player, or a king. And so Samuel looks at Eliab, and he goes, man, surely this is the guy. I look at all the qualifications, and Jesse checks his checklist, and he goes, surely this is the anointed one. Now, let's pause for just a second and look at, even back then, people were judging people based on their looks, based on their approach. People decided who was going to be somebody and who wasn't just based on their approach. And Samuel goes, surely this guy is the anointed one. But as he is surrendered to God, Samuel hears God say this, don't judge by his appearance or his height, for I've rejected him. The Lord doesn't see things the way that you see them. People judge by outward appearance, but the Lord looks at the heart. Even back then, culture was trying to put their fingerprint on people, saying, hey, if you look the part, that's all you need. If you're big enough, if you're good looking enough, if you're strong enough, if you're smart enough, all these things that the world looks at, these outward appearances that the world looks at, even back then, this is the way that culture puts its fingerprint on people. And you know that Eliab knows how he looks. He recognizes who he is. He knows he's Jesse's firstborn. He's like, yeah. But God says, no. Quit looking at the way he looks. Quit judging him by his appearance. Stop putting credit to things that I don't give credit to. Stop making things important that I don't consider important. God is saying this to Samuel, and Samuel's got to go, okay, no, he's not it. Now, some of you in this room, you're on the side of things where you're looking at the world around you, you're looking at the culture around you, and you look at all these people that are beautiful, all these people that are talented, all these people that are ripped, all these people that are just like, man, that's what it's all about. And you have allowed that fingerprint to be put on you that says, and you can never be that. Or you can never be important because you don't look like that. You don't act like that. And some of you have taken on culture's fingerprint that you are not enough the way that you are. And so some do whatever they think they need to do to get there. Whatever they need to do to their hair, whatever they need to do to their bodies, whatever they need to do to their attitude in order to measure up so that the world will think they're enough. There are some of you in here, you are the beautiful people. You know that you've got talent, that you've got looks, that you've got skill, that you've got whatever, all the things that the world says, hey, this is important. This is what counts. And you have put all of the credit in that, saying, okay, well, I look this way, I act this way, I've got these talents, I've got these skills, and so therefore I am enough. And you are allowing those things, those superficial, those surface level things to define you. You have made that important for yourself and deemed that the most important thing. But here, what God is pointing out and what God says to Samuel is, stop judging him by his appearance. Stop making the things that I don't call important, important. See, God wants a heart that is chasing after him. Because a heart in if a person's heart is going after God, God can do anything with anybody. And so the world is looking for the perfect person. The world is looking for the person who looks good, acts good, plays sports good, plays music good, what all these things, and says that's the important stuff. And here God is going, no. I look at the heart. I don't care what skills you got. I'm looking at the heart, and I want somebody who's chasing after me. Eliab, sorry, not you. Jesse's kind of taken back by this. He's like, oh, it's not my firstborn. I mean, the firstborn son is it. I mean, he's the one who gets everything. He's the heir of everything of the family. And so he's like, okay, it's not him. Okay. Eliab, go find your two younger brothers. And so he brings the two of the younger brothers before Samuel. And they go, Samuel, okay, well, here are my next two sons. What do you think of them? Samuel looks at him. Imagine, this had to have been super cool. It's like Samuel's there and you know he hears from God. And so you're standing there in front of him and Samuel's looking at you. And you're like, and to the next two sons, Samuel goes, no. Okay, go find your next younger brothers. Brings in two more. Now, Jesse's going, okay, that's 5. Okay, go find your two younger brothers. So they bring in son number 6 and 7. Ta-da! And Jesse looks at him, Samuel looks at him and goes, God says no. And Jesse is there and he's going, what are you going to do now? Well, Samuel, you said you were here to anoint one of my sons to be king. Here they are. And Samuel goes, Jesse, do you have any other sons? And Jesse says this, well, there's Dave out in the field, but he's looking after the sheep. He's my youngest. Get what just happened. What did David's father just do to his own son? He totally excluded him. He put his thumbprint on his son that you are insignificant. You are not somebody that ever could be what this guy is here to do. He wasn't even an afterthought. He was a no thought. Jesse had put his fingerprint on David, saying, well, I got Dave out in the field, but he's watching sheep and he's the youngest. The word used there for youngest is small and insignificant. His dad. Now, maybe Jesse totally loved David, but in this situation, he was not even considered. He put this fingerprint on David saying, well, you don't look the part. You don't act the part. You haven't attained this status where anybody would want anything to do with you in this situation. So here's my sons. Oh, Dave? Well, he's out in the field. He's watching the sheep, but he's my youngest. Some of you wrestle with this every day. Some of you wrestle with this fingerprint that you're the smallest, you're insignificant, you don't measure up, you're not good enough for whatever the situation may be. And some of you try and fight it and you try and become acceptable. You try and measure up and you try and be enough. And some of you don't. Some of you just accept this and you're like, yeah, I'm a loser. Yeah, God, I'm never going to be that because that's what I have to be. And I could never be that, so I guess I'll just be what I am. And some of you wrestle with this every day. Now, maybe it's because you've been told you're worthless. I think I've told this story before, but it's the situation, and I grew up in a home where my parents loved me dearly and they encouraged me, and so I kind of lived in that bubble figuring, oh, well, this is what parents do. They encourage. But I was at a swim meet for my brother-in-law, and they were swimming against Rancho. He went to Ontario, and they were swimming against Rancho, and at these swim meets, the parents would get down at the other, on the opposite end of the lane, from where they started, and they're there, and they're like, "Come on, you go, go, go!" You know, they're cheering their kid on. And I was in this lane, I'm cheering for Matthew, and this really intense guy is next to me, and I'm like, "Go, Matt, go, 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 go! Come on, pull, because he did breaststroke," and I'm like, "Pull." They get down. And this dad next to me, he's like, "Move, go, go!" And it was just like, ah. And he had a stopwatch. He's like, "Go, go!" I'm like, "Come on, Matt, come on, go!" They get to the end, they touch, they turn and go back. And I'm like, "Yeah, go, Matt, go, yeah!" This guy next to me takes his stopwatch, he throws it down on the ground. He said, "I should have raised dogs." Some of you live with that fingerprint of worthless on you, whether it's because somebody has actually told you you're worthless, or you've tried so hard to measure up to what society says is important or is enough that you've accepted that fingerprint of going, you can't be enough, you're not good enough, you're not good looking enough, you're not talented enough, you could never. And here we have David, whose own dad, when this opportunity to, like, hey, I'm here to anoint the new king, dad doesn't even think about him. Oh, Dave? Sheep boy out in the fields. He's my youngest. He's my least significant. And what I want to point out to you guys, that I want you to accept, I can't make you accept it, but this is the truth of God, that God does not overlook you. You may have a hard time believing that, because some of you have absolutely convinced yourself that he does. You've absolutely convinced yourself, you've bought into the lie that you aren't good enough, you're not talented, all these things. But God does not overlook you the way that Jesse overlooked David. It's not in God's nature. It's not who God is. God created you. He knows you, and he knows what his plan is for you. He does not overlook you. And when God looks at you, he sees his glory. He sees him in you because he created you in his image. And when God looks at you, he sees his glory, not the glory that the world expects of you. Everybody around you, this is why God had to tell Samuel, hey, stop looking at the surface stuff. Stop looking at the physical stuff that the world says is so important. I don't look at that. I look at their heart. So when God looks at you, he sees his glory, not the glory that the world expects of you. So if you're here tonight and you feel like the weight of the world to perform and to be the best and to do all these things is on you, give yourself a break. Because God doesn't look at you that way. God doesn't expect that from you. God expects you to live as his kid. God expects you to live as he's created you to live. And when God looks at you, he doesn't regret what he doesn't see. See, the world looks at you and evaluates you and says, it's too bad you're not enough of this. I actually got to talk to some Major League Baseball scouts. They watched me play, and I got to talk to them, and one of the things that they said was, we're not even going to look at you unless you're 6'1". And what you would have to do is and it was just, they looked at me and they regretted what they didn't see. They didn't see me tall enough. They didn't see me throwing 93 miles an hour. They didn't see what they wanted to see, and so therefore I wasn't enough. And in that situation, I wasn't. I wasn't physically enough. God had something completely different designed for me. When God looks at you, he doesn't regret what he doesn't see. For some of you, the world, all you're experiencing is the world regretting and going, it's too bad you're not prettier. It's too bad, it's really too bad you're not cool enough. It's really sad you don't have a nice enough voice. It's really sad that your hair's that color. It's really sad that you're that tall or that short. The world regrets what it doesn't see. But God looks at you and he doesn't see what the glory that the world makes so important. He sees him in you because he created you in his image. So, Jesse sends somebody out to get David. All right, fine. Go get David. We'll see wait till you see him, Samuel. He's not much, he's not like Eliab. So a little bit of time goes by and here comes David. And the word in the Bible that describes David is ruddy. Ruddy means he's short, he's kind of stocky, and he's just kind of a hardy guy. He's kind of like a UFC fighter kind of a guy. He's like, just, here I come, And he stands there in front of Samuel. Smells like sheep poop. He's been handling these dumb animals like all day, and he just like, oh, sorry, one pooped on me, and then just yelling. Then I had to force feed one, and he threw it back up on me. And so, what do you want, Samuel? And Samuel looks at him, and he says, God says, this is the one I've chosen. In front of all his brothers, in front of his dad, who had determined who David was. He's the younger brother. He's the insignificant one. He's the one out in the field with the sheep. In front of them, God says, this is the one that I've chosen. The fingerprint that the world had put on him meant nothing. And this is what God wants to speak to you today. That when God's fingerprint is on you, when you accept God's fingerprint, you don't need the world to define you. Think about that. Think about it in your own life, because we all do it. There's not a person in here who's got it so together. It's like, there's in some way in your life, you're hoping that the world will accept you and will define you. But when God's fingerprint is on you, when you accept that fingerprint, you don't need the world to identify you. And right there in front of his brothers, God says, you're the one I've chosen. Not because you've performed well enough, not because you look the part, not because the world, you've won the popularity contest. You're the one that I've chosen because I love you. But what if the world doesn't like what it sees? And what if the things that the world doesn't like about us is what God decides to use? Because what if God decides to take this ruddy young guy who's been out in the fields? What if God decides to take you, who can't make varsity, who didn't make the travel ball team, who didn't get the solo in choir, who plays an instrument, but you kind of just bang it around and you drop it on accident. You just kind of, what if God decides to use that? What if God calls on you and says, you, I've appointed you. Then we have a choice. One, pull back and let the world say, no, God doesn't want me. All these people over here say I'm useless. All these people over here say I'm not good enough. All these people over here say there's no way this could be meant for me. And pull back. Take on the identity of the world, the fingerprint that the world wants to put on you, and just pull back. Or press into the truth of who God is and what he says about you. Every person in this room has this choice. Every one of us. Pull back, believe what the world says about you, and take on that fingerprint and say, I'm sorry, God, I'd love to do what you're asking me to do. I'd love to step into this opportunity that you have seemed to have given me, but the world says that I'm just, this sheep guy. Or press into the truth and go, you know what? I hear all the things that people are saying about me, and it hurts. I don't like it. But I'm going to press into what God says about me. And he says, I'm his masterpiece. Every one of you in this room, you're his masterpiece. But this is the choice that we have. And David was anointed king. Right there. This guy who started his day like every other day out in a field. God said, you. Are you open to that? You may look at today and be like, okay, February 21st. What if today's the day? What if tomorrow's the day that you finally accept and listen for God's voice that's saying, you are enough. And I'm ready to use you. I'm not waiting for you to get cool. I'm not waiting for you to get talented enough. I'm not waiting for the world to finally realize, oh, wow, you really are beautiful. Oh, you really are something. God's saying, I'm ready now. And I say you're a masterpiece. And David was anointed king of Israel. Now, here's the thing. The king of Israel, Saul, was still alive. They already had a king. So it wasn't like, this is the one God's chosen. And all of a sudden, Dave's king. Saul was still king. This meant that David was going to have to wait. This meant that nothing really changed for David. You know what happened after Saul left? Where did David go? Back out into the fields. Back being sheep boy. Back to smelling like this animal doesn't even have knees. Just... So he had to even trust, okay, God, I believe that you've called me. I believe that I'm important. I believe that I'm a masterpiece. Okay. Sometime later, the army of Israel was in a standoff with the Philistines. The Philistines were really bad people. They did really awful things as they would invade nations. And the army of Israel was in a standoff with them. And there was the valley of Elah. And on either side, there was the Philistines and there was the Israelites. And they were standing there. And the Philistines had this guy named Goliath. Now, Goliath was unlike anybody they had ever seen, let alone had to fight. Okay? Goliath, they say, stood around 9 feet tall. Can you imagine 9 feet tall? Can you imagine somebody who's not, let me help. Oh yeah, this is Oscar. This is just under 9 feet. Now, imagine this guy, but a little fatter, and wearing armor, that the armor itself, just the coat of the mail that he wore, weighed 125 pounds. He carried a spear where just the head of the spear, just the iron tip of the spear, weighed 15 pounds. He had a shield bearer. He had an entire other guy who carried his shield for him. I'm not sure what this guy did. For somebody who's 9 feet tall, like arrows are coming in, he's like, ah! Ah! You know, it's like a video game. It's like, I got it. Dunk. But he had a guy. The Goliath's legs were covered in metal as a shield, as the armor that he had to wear. This guy, I mean, he defined beast mode. This guy was incredible. Now, for a month and a half, every morning and every night, Goliath would come down the hill into the valley of Elah, and he would raise his voice. He would shout. Now, I'm pretty loud, and I'm 5'10". Imagine the lungs on a 9-foot human being. And this guy would come out into the valley, and he would say, hey, you Israelites, come on. Send me one of your warriors. I know you've got to have one. I mean, you've got to have somebody that is like your superstar. Come on. Bring him down. Anybody? I'm waiting. I curse you, and I curse your puny God. And he would walk back up the hill. Every morning and every night, this is what Goliath declared over the people of God. Every morning, every night, he screamed at them they weren't enough. And the Israelite army would retreat, they'd run and they'd hide, like, oh, Goliath, it's Goliath, every morning and every night. It had been a little while since Jesse had heard from his 3 oldest sons who were in Saul's army. They were out at the front fighting, or standing there being scared by the Philistines. And so Jesse calls David in from the field. He's like, David, all right, I want you to go find a substitute shepherd. And I want you to go, here, take these cheeses and assorted breads and these some grapes and make sure you hurry and go and find your, oh wait, hold on, here's a gift for their captain. All right, and I want you to go off and I want you to bring back word how your brothers are. David's like, okay, Dad. And David, hustles off his ruddy little body. He's just like, and he's got his little basket and he's off. And he's moving, and he gets to the camp. Now, he gets to the camp, and nobody's there. He's like, where's everybody? And then he hears it. Hey, send me somebody to fight. Aren't you the army of God? What, are you afraid that he's not going to be able to deliver you or deliver me into your hands? Oh, you won't be able to defeat me? I curse you and your puny God. So as David's standing there, all of a sudden everybody comes running back into camp. Like, oh my God, no, this is Goliath, he's so scary, and he's big and David watches his brothers come running back into camp, dive into their tent, and the whole tent's like, he's like, what is going on? Why? Hold on. Wait a minute. Imagine the embarrassment that they felt, which may have had something to do with their response to David. Because here's what they said to David. Once they crawled out from their tent, they're like, I wasn't afraid. They look at him and they say, what are you doing here? What about those few sheep you're supposed to be taking care of? I know about your pride and your deceit. You just want to see the battle. So they immediately put their fingerprint on him, saying, you're only worth watching some sheep. And you're here because you just want to watch what the real men do. You just want to say that you were part of it, that you witnessed it, your pride, and you just want to be part of all this. And for some, that would be all it would take to send you running. For some, this is all it takes. It takes just a little bit of somebody coming up against you and saying, what, you're going to try out for the team? What, you think you sing good enough to be on worship team? What, you think you're pretty enough to, no, I'm sorry, no. For some of you, that's all it takes. You have adopted that fingerprint of saying that you're not enough. And here they say to David, what? Wait a minute, hold on. Aren't those little sheep going to miss you? You should just run on home. People minimize who you are. The world is so quick to tell you you're not enough. David's reply is, what did I do? That's literally what he said. Like, what did I do? Here, brought you some cheese. And they say, go on home. But he chooses not to let the opinion of his brothers keep him from what God is stirring up inside of him. And so David starts going around to all his brothers' buddies. Those of you with siblings, don't you love it when your younger siblings talk to your friends? Like, don't know, you're going to get your nerd on them. Stop. He goes around and he starts talking to all his brother's friends. They're like, hey, so, what's up with this guy? He comes out and he's like, me, and you all, and they're like, dude, you seen that guy? He's huge. That's why Saul said that anybody who fights him doesn't have to pay taxes anymore. And David was like, oh, bonus, okay. And David continues out. He's like, so nobody's going to fight him? There's nobody. It's like, what about that guy over there? He's pretty big. No, he isn't. And David starts going, well, then I'll fight him. That's what it was like for everybody who David came up to. I was like, who is this kid? What's going on? Well, apparently, David made such a commotion that it got back to the king. David somehow had gone to enough people or had been obnoxious enough that it got back to King Saul, and they're like, hey, there's this kid who's willing to die. And Saul is like, really? We'll bring him here. So David goes to Saul. Saul's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? What? David's like, I can take him. I'm not afraid. I'm gonna get him. Don't you worry about that guy. I'm gonna handle him. And Saul goes, all right, I'm willing to let you try. I don't care if you die. But here, I mean, I'm going to feel guilty when you just walk out there. And he goes, so, here, take my armor. And Saul, remember what I said about Saul earlier? Saul was huge. He was head and shoulders taller than everybody else. He was a big guy. He goes into his closet. He's like, oh, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and yellow, black and, oh, yellow and black. Mix it up a little. And he finds his armor, and he brings it out. He's like, come here, Davy. Come here. David's like, thank you, sir. He tries to take a step, and he falls to the ground. Saul's like, yeah, you're great. Okay, go ahead. And David's like, no, hold on. This isn't gonna work. This is not gonna, I don't need you to dress me. And he decides that he's gonna trust who God has made him to be, rather than believing what everybody else doesn't, like, well, I regret what I don't see. Oh, you're not enough. You're not good enough. You're not big enough. You're not strong enough. You don't have the skills. And instead, David goes, no. I'm gonna handle this. See, what Saul said to David was, don't be ridiculous. You ever been called ridiculous? Fingerprint. Saul says, don't be ridiculous. There's no way you can fight this Philistine. Anybody ever had somebody look at you and go, there's no way? Fingerprint. You're only a boy, and he's been a man of war since his youth. Ever had anybody declare over you, you're only? Fingerprint. See, Saul decided, this is who you are. And he spoke it over David. And David at that point could have just gone, all right, you're right. Okay. And walked away. You're only, there's no way. Now, there are certain circumstances, there are things that you are called to and not called to. Okay, me not being built like a baseball player, okay, that's just not something. I'm not built like a football player. I'm not built like a movie star. It's just not who I am. So there are things that we are not called to. There are certainly talents and abilities that you are either given or not given. I should not spend all my time trying to get good at math. It's just not who I am. It's not the way God has gifted me. So there are certainly things we're not called to do, but what God is saying is that with the fingerprint of God on your life, you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength. That as you trust God, he's going to lead you to what he's called you to, and when you follow him to what he's called you to, you'll have the strength to do it. You're enough. And God's designed you for that. So Saul tries to equip David. He gives him his helmet and his armor and his sword. And he's like, all right, go for it. It's not going to work. David goes, no. I'm not going to do that. But I find this interesting. David turned down help. Saul was trying to equip him. Saul was trying to make him ready for battle, but in all the wrong ways. And it made me think of this question: who are you allowing to prepare you? Who in your life are you allowing to speak into your life, to tell you what you can do and what you can't do? What are you believing of people? See, they may have the best intentions. They may try and encourage you in all kinds of ways that, the world, hey, just do your best. Have a can-do attitude. Pull yourself up by your bootstraps. All these things that the world would go, hey, look, this is encouraging. Or the world tears you down and tells you things like, yeah, don't get your hopes up. Yeah, I hope it works out. Probably won't. What are you allowing to be spoken over you? Who are you allowing to prepare you? Because God says, don't be afraid. Over and over and over in his word to us, he says, don't be afraid. Not because what you're facing isn't scary. Going up against Goliath, scary. But God says, don't be afraid because I'm with you. When you take on God's fingerprint, you have the faith to believe that, you know what, whatever I'm coming up against, God's with me. And God says, I don't need to be afraid. So we can stand in confidence when we have the fingerprint of God on our lives. When we accept that fingerprint, rather than what the world says, like, oh, well, good luck. When God says, hey, I've led you here. I'll equip you. I'll make you ready. So David says, forget it. And he goes down to a little river and he picks up 5 stones. I don't know why he picked up 5 stones. I don't know if that was sort of like him going, all right, God, I trust you, but I've been known to miss. So I'm just going to get some insurance rocks, which may prove, some of his humanity of just like, God, I'll trust you, but what if I'm a dork? What if I, dang, hold on. So he picks up 5 rocks and he grabs his stick and he heads out. Now, at one point, he walks out into the valley of Elah and he's like, I am ready. And somebody runs to Goliath's tent and goes, hey, Goliath, they sent somebody out to fight you. Goliath's like, yeah! He gets all dressed. He's ready. He puts on his armor. He grabs his 15-pound spear and he kicks his shield guy. He's like, come on. And they go, right out. And then he walks down the hill and there is David. And he stands there and he takes one look. And again, the world tries to put its fingerprint on David. Here's what Goliath says. Am I a dog that you come at me with a stick? He cursed David. Come over here and I'll give your flesh to the birds and the wild animals. David, knowing how his dad views him, knowing how his brothers view him, knowing how the king views him, knowing how Goliath views him, he stands there and he decides to believe in how God sees him. You guys, in your life, when you're facing the giant of your life, whether it's insecurity or fear or reputation or abilities or inabilities or looks, whatever, when you're facing the giant that you face, what do you believe? Will you believe not in how everybody else sees you and the fingerprint that they've put on you, but in how God sees you? And it says that David, in his most manly voice, now, in his most manly voice to you and me, is probably like, hey, you! Goliath is 9 feet tall. This guy has 9-foot eardrums. Or at least eardrums that are 9 feet up. So, David to Goliath. David steps out to Goliath.
Hey, you big meanie. You may come at me with your sword and with your shield and with all the things that make you big and bad. But I need more. Hold on.
was a great speech that David gave. Right to Goliath, right in his face.
You may come at me with sword and spear and shield, but I come at you. You listening to me, long legs? You. I come at you with the name of the Lord. And he's going to deliver you into my hands. Sucker.
Now, when you face the giants in your life, what will your confidence be in? See, David didn't go out there suddenly feeling like, I've got this sling and these 5 rocks. I'm going to destroy this guy. He didn't go out there going, all right, he's 9 feet. I'm a solid 5'4". I'm good. I think I got a chance. He's not out there pounding his chest going, come on, I'm enough. All on my own. I can do this and I don't need anything and I don't need this army behind me. I'm going to take you. What does he say? I come to you. I come at you. In the name of the Lord. The power of God is the reason that I'm going to defeat you. You guys, in your life, when you face the giants in your life, what is your confidence in? You know you're not enough. You know you can't do it on your own. And the world reinforces that. But through the power of God, we are promised that you can do all things. When you face your giants, what is your confidence in? As you face the giants in your life, and I was just thinking, like, what are some of these giants? I mean, things like bullies. Sometimes they're literal giants. Like, that dude is an 11th grader. The bullies, people who don't believe in you, situations that seem too big, low self-esteem. What will your confidence be in when you face these things? And here's what I'm going to wrap up with this. This is not a story about a kid who was enough. This is a story about a kid who took the fingerprint of God and allowed God to work through him. This is a story about the power of God working in and through somebody's life. This is a story about a guy who said, I am defined by God alone. So I put that out to you. What are you allowing to define you? That's what this whole series is about. What are you allowing to speak into your life to define you? What fingerprints are you taking on, believing when people say you're not enough? What is your confidence in when, in reality, you're not enough? Do you try to be enough? In what ways in your life are you trying to be enough? You're trying to be cool enough and talented enough and respected enough. And what are you allowing yourself to be defined by? Because the fingerprint of God says you're enough. The fingerprint of God says, I have a plan for you. And it may not be the plan that you have for you. Jeff, I know you love baseball. That's not the plan I have for you. Don't let the fingerprint of the world say you're not enough. This is a story about the power of God moving in someone's life who said, God, you identify me. You define me. And God did. So as we go to our detour groups, I want to encourage you to be real, be honest, be real honest, and talk about what are some of these things, what are some of these ways, put it out there that you have believed the fingerprint of the culture? What are some ways that you have allowed yourself to be identified by things that are not of God? It's not what God says about you. And are you willing to invite him to do his work?